What led you, Frank, to uncover the mystery of Jodorowsky's Dune?
Well, it was really just hearing the nugget of the idea. I mean, if you're familiar with Alejandro Jodorowsky at all, and you know those wild movies that he made, and then you kind of learn, oh, he was going to make Dune before David Lynch did. That's really weird. And then not only was he, his projects die every day, and what's really left, but maybe a couple of screenplay drafts. But this was a completely realized film in a book form. It's wild, and you look at the more we learned about it, his team of spiritual warriors, his amazing cast of actors, Pink Floyd coming in to do the music, just it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then once I saw an image of that book, I knew that I just needed to see inside of it. I didn't know if it would be a movie, I didn't know what, but I know that I needed to see inside that book, and the only way to see inside that book was to find the guy himself and speak to him.
Whose philosophy I feel like really fulfills the whole story.
I mean, he's as he says, he's a very spiritual filmmaker, not in a religious sense, not in a God that's spoken about specifically, but his goal was to change the world. He wanted the film to be a prophet. He wanted to change all the young minds of all the world. And that is what happened. I mean, the world was changed. Whether his movie ended up on the big screen in 1976 or whether it ended up on the big screen through this documentary, his ideas still got out, permeated into the world, and changed the course of history.
The spiritual warriors. The idea that I love is that he has got both old and new guard of avant-garde in there. He's got Orson Welles, he's got Salvador Dali, and then he's also got Magma and Pink Floyd and Mick Jagger, and he's got Chris Foss, and he's got Geiger.
I think that he just sees something or meets someone and knows that they are the person. And the perfect example in the film is, of course, him. Douglas Trumbull did 2001. He's the greatest special effects guy. I must go find him. And then he goes to find him and realizes that Douglas Trumbull is not his spiritual warrior. But who is his spiritual warrior but Dan O'Bannon, the guy that had done the special effects on Dark Star, which is essentially John Carpenter's thesis film from USC.
You sat with him for several years over the course, like 3 weeks here, 3 weeks there, things like that.
Yeah, we shot with him throughout 2011, 2012, into 2013, kind of going back and forth. He lives in Paris, so we were just going back and forth, getting more information, go shoot an interview with somebody else, go back to him, kind of, corroborate the evidence and see what he had to say. So the more time we got to spend with him, the better it is.
Does he still have that amazing book that I guess they made probably about a dozen or so of them? They said that they brought them to studios, that they made some for every studio. So I'm guessing at that time 75, about a dozen or so, give or take. Does he still have that original one?
Oh, he has. I mean, the original one that he has is the one that's in the film. So that one exists. Michel Sardou recently found one in his mother's house as he was cleaning it out after she passed away. He found it hidden in a closet somewhere. So that's 2. And in the research for the film, we found on eBay that a copy had sold to a Japanese collector about 10 years ago or so. But we couldn't find anybody because both of the eBay usernames are extinct. But somebody in Japan has a third one. But I think when this film is released, we're going to start hearing about people finding it in attics and in different studio executives' desk drawers and stuff.
Had the film been made, do you think that had it flopped, had it not flopped, do you think it would have had the same impact, the same DNA strand running through 35 years of cinema that it does now, having not been made? Do you think that would have had the same impact?
Well, it would have a different impact. I don't think that if the film had been made, I don't think that other filmmakers could take those ideas and put them into their films because they would be called out, for sure. But there's the universe, and then there's the multiverse, and there's different timelines, and there's the timeline that we're living in, which is Jodorowsky's Dune did not make it to the big screen, and then there's the timeline, let's say, where his Dune does make it, or did make it to the big screen, and let's say that it was a huge success. Let's say it was the biggest movie of 1976. What would that mean for the film studios? Would they think, oh, these weird avant-garde films are something we can get behind and make a lot of money on? And if so, what would film history look like? And if his Dune had come out and been a disaster, let's say 6 people had seen it and everyone said it was horrible and they all walked out, what would that mean? Because at that same time is when George Lucas and Gary Kurtz were making Star Wars at Fox. And Fox was already not behind Star Wars. They thought it was stupid. Oh, this movie's never going to make any money. They were looking for any excuse to pull that plug. And if Jodorowsky's giant budgeted sci-fi space opera had been a flop, that would have been the perfect excuse for Fox to pull the plug on the other giant sci-fi science fiction space opera. And without Star Wars coming out, for better or for worse, what does that do to the timeline of film history? What would the big films be? What would the big tentpole films be every summer? They certainly wouldn't be movies aimed at kids. Maybe they would be films aimed at us. I don't know.
We just joked about it would be Merchant Ivory films. It would have been, all right, The Room with the View is coming out this summer. All right.
Part 3.
Bring your kids, right, part 3.
You know, in his mind, he made the picture. Yeah. As he said, I make the picture. You know, all of his designs, everything is in the book. I said, I did the hard part, and that was the easy part. Yeah. Make it an animation, make a feature film of it, use it as a blueprint. So he has I don't think he ever gives it a second thought, because even he took his own ideas and, as he says, put them into comics, put them into other films.
That these are the people who make Alien, and without Alien, had Alien not been made, there'd be no Blade Runner, no Aliens, everythth like that, no Matrix, things. There's a ripple effect across.
But
across
everything, it's stated in the film, but it's true. Like all these roads really lead back to Jodorowsky. Yeah. Because even taking Blade Runner, I mean, how influential is Alien? How influential is Blade Runner? Blade Runner came from Jodorowsky's Dune. Blade Runner came from Dan O'Bannon and Mobius meeting on Dune, writing a comic book together called The Long Tomorrow. And if you look at The Long Tomorrow, it is Blade Runner. It's exactly that setting, that cityscape, the way it's built, that comes from The Long Tomorrow. Because Mobius and Dan O'Bannon showed it to Ridley Scott. He gave it to Sid Mead, and off into film history it went. So really, all of these things, even things we couldn't touch on in this film, come back to this event in history. He just basically pulled it out of thin air, as he said that he never, at the time that he agreed to make the film, he had never read the book. He was just trying to make money. He was to live. He was living in New York, and he had made El Topo, and he had made Holy Mountain, and he was working with a producer named Alan Klein, and Alan Klein funded the Holy Mountain, and Alan Klein, to follow up the Holy Mountain, wanted Jodorowsky to direct the story of O, which is essentially, if you don't know the story of O, it's like the 50 Shades of Grey of the mid-'70s, yeah. And Jodorowsky didn't want to direct that, so he just called up Michel Sardou, who had released his films to success in France, and said, I want to make a movie with you. And Michel said, what do you want to make? Dune. Just to get on the plane. He said, I could have said Hamlet, I could have said Don Quixote, I could have said Romeo and Juliet, but he said Dune. I don't think that he would equate his experience on Dune with the Lost in La Mancha documentary, because that's a real, I think in Jodo's eyes, that's a real failure. Poor Terry Gilliam was out in the desert, right, shooting. Every kind of calamity and catastrophe happened to shut down the production, which left them with a bunch of half-full reels of film. While Jodorowsky really feels that this is not a failure. This is a grand success. Look at the wonderful thing that I created. And maybe it wasn't meant to happen. Maybe it was just meant for them all to create all this beautiful artwork and for it to end right there in this book. Those ideas still go out into the universe through the pages of the book, through his spiritual warriors. And then maybe I'm the last spiritual warrior, and I came along 40 years later and approached him and finished the process of getting those ideas out into the world and getting the full story out into the world. But I was watching a video of him shot 2 years ago in Spain, where he's speaking before an audience of 6,000 people. And he's in this kind of theater in the round and walking around the stage. And he was 80, this is 2 years ago, so he was 83 at the time. But I look at that video, I see a man of no older than 50. And he has this power over the entire audience. And he has the entire audience cross their arms like this and hold each other's hands. So 6,000 people in this beautiful theater all around him, all grasping each other's hands and swaying back and forth like the movement of an ocean while humming And it's the most extraordinary,
That's amazing.
and it's just him speaking in Spanish. And I didn't understand the word, but I understood everything because you understand him. He comes across. He's international. He's a citizen of the world. It's the most extraordinary video. And he was an 83-year-old man commanding an audience of every age, and he's reborn when he tells these stories. He will live to be 300 years. He will outlive us all. Because, as he says, he's always creating. He's always doing something. He has more things to do. You only die when you stop. He's like a shark. He just keeps moving, and keeps creating. Because he was very hands-off during the process, and he let me tell the story, which is amazing, because it's such a personal story to him, but he really let some yahoo like me come in and tell the story. But, we were at Cannes, and he was going to see the film for the first time. We were in the theater, and I was sitting here, and his wife was next to me, and then Jodo was in the next chair. I think he wanted a buffer in between us because he didn't know what to expect. And so all during the film, I'm kind of, nervously watching it, and I kept trying to look out of the corner of my eye in a slick fashion to see, is he asleep? Is he laughing? Is he enjoying it? Is he contacting his lawyer? Is he going to sue me? What's going to happen? And I kept trying to watch, and I could see that he was really engrossed. And then at the end, in the last words of the film, I looked over and I see both he and his wife are wiping tears away, which is always great because you always want to make an 85-year-old man cry. I felt so good about myself. But so I waited for the credits to roll and the lights came back up, and I leaned forward and I said, so what did you think? And he just turned to me and said, it's perfect.